Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. Well, I did it. I've made the easiest kerf maker you could make. Wait. Don't go away. Up. Let me explain to you how mine is so different. I know there's hundreds of them out there in videos, but you're going to find three things about this one that is totally different than the others. And those three reasons are, first, my kerf maker has no moving parts. Let me set my coffee down. I'll be wondering where I put that later. So anyway, it has no moving parts. Second, I can make this kerf maker in under 5 minutes. Probably under 2. And third, mine actually works on more than one blade. So, and that's one thing you can say about these kerf makers that they make out there. They only work on one blade. Now, I can still do any size wood I want, any size dado I want accurately, just like you would with any other kerf maker. But mine is so much more simpler. I think you're really going to like it. And I made it just out of a piece of scrap wood. In fact, I'm going to make one for you here in less than, it only takes us a couple minutes, and I'm just going to do it from this old piece of scrap wood right here. So it's like 1.25 by 1.25 or whatever. It doesn't matter. So let's go over first what mine looks like, and I'm going to explain it to you. And then we're going to make a kerf maker, and then I'm going to show you how it works, both on this saw and on that saw, and it'll work 100% every single time. So this is the kerf maker, and quite simply, it does. This blade being a 1/16 inch blade, that one being a 1/4 inch, mine has two. If I do it one way, it uses the 1/16 inch kerf here, which is just a rabbet on this block of wood. The key to this is to get this exactly where you want it to be so that you can use it to make your kerfs. And then if you turn it 90 degrees, then this is the 1/4 inch one on this side. So here's the other one. Let me show you how this thing works. One other thing I'm going to make is a terminology you're going to hear me using, and that is that when I'm referring to, let's say, just the 1/16 inch side here, that means that I'm referring to this surface right here, or these two surfaces right here that are parallel to each other, opposite sides. This is the skinny end, this is the fat end. If I do a same thing with my 1/4 inch, this is the skinny end, this is the fat end. So when I refer to the skinny end, I'm referring to the end that has the rabbet on it. This rabbet is exactly 1/4 inch plus 1/64 of an inch lower than this surface here, that step down. And this one is 1/16 of an inch plus 1/64 of an inch to give you this one. And by doing that, I can cut a perfect dado on either one of my saws using nothing more than this little piece of scrap wood. So I made mine out of hard maple. You want to make it out of something that's pretty stable. And I do not recommend you put a finish on this because it might change a dimension somewhere. It does weird things. I did one and I put a finish on it and it didn't work right anymore. So this one, it's hard maple. I shouldn't have any problem, and I'm not going to ever use any, I'm never going to put a finish on it, quite frankly. So to use it, if I'm using it in the 1/16 mode on this saw right here, then when I set it down on the surface, I can see it says 1/16. So when I have it in place, it says 1/16. If that says 1/4 inch when I look down at it, and I'm on this saw, I'm using the wrong one. So keep that in mind. If you're only making one, if you're only using one saw, one blade, you don't have to do the double. And we're going to make a single one here now. So we're going to take this scrap of wood and we're going to turn it into a kerf maker, okay, that we can use on this saw blade. So let me turn you so you can see my table saw surface right here. And that should do it. I'm going to use my miter gauge for this saw, and I have my sled set up for doing it on this saw. So first we're going to work with this saw. So let's take this and let's make a kerfer real quick. To make a kerf, we have to establish exactly where the left side of my blade is on this saw, on this stop block. We want it to be exactly right there against here. So what we're going to do is, if I bring this up to my saw blade and I'm going to move it so it cuts the very edge off of this, like so. Now we're going to put a stop block right here against that very gently and clamp this down so that this is now where I'm going to cut this to be right there. Let me raise the blade up. That should do, about there, about an inch higher or so. And now we have this against there. Let's take and do this cut. And now this is my reference point for the left side of that blade. Now we want to cut a kerf into this, the exact thickness, plus a 64th of that. To do that, I'm going to flip this up to give this more stability so I can just hold this against there. But now when I cut this side here is exactly in line with the left side of my blade, but we need to actually be a 64th of an inch deeper than this. So we got to move this over a 64th of an inch more to make this work. So I'm going to redo this cut, except I'm going to take and add a 64th of an inch, which is 2 business cards. So I'm going to put 2 business cards in between my stationary stop block and my stop block that I'm using to do the cuts. Now that I have this in between there also, I'm going to recut this to that length. Like so. Doesn't take much. Now I'm going to take my cards out, push this over to the stop, and now this surface right here, well, you sure can't see that very well with this, can you? Let me do this. Let's cut this one more time just to be safe, because I did disconnect that. Because I think that's going to help you be able to see what's going on here a little better. So now we're going to put these cards in here. And let me move this over just a hair. We're going to recut this with the business cards in there. Okay? So now let's do the cut. I'm going to take my cards out and slide this over that extra 64th of an inch. Now I'm going to turn this up just to give this more stability to hold this. And now we're going to take and let's put whatever surface we're going to put that on. We'll put it on this surface. So I'm going to put that. Excuse me. Make sure there's no sawdust. This is important. Now let's make this cut right here. And as you can see, it left just a tiny bit there. But that doesn't matter. I made this at least over 3/4 of an inch wide. That's because my stop block is 3/4 of an inch wide. And the reason I did that is now we're going to be using this Kerfmaker. This is the fat end right here, and this is the skinny end. So we're going to set this down so the rabbit area is going to set against my stop block, like so. Now we're going to put a kerf in this to fit this thing perfectly, like so. And we want this to go in there and fit nice and tight. And the way we do that, so we put that in between there, put our other piece right in between there, so that we have both pieces up against the block. And the step is against this block here. Okay? That little rabbit area. then we take our piece that we're going to cut the rabbit in, and let's just do it on this. Now, first off, let's set this rabbit where we want to put it. And just for grins, I'm going to put the rabbit right here. And you can measure it out and everything. Mark the top of your piece that you're going to cut. And I'm going to line this up to my kerf. And then we bring these two pieces over next to that. Bring this over. I hold this one with my hand so I can adjust everything back and forth. And now I line this up to my kerf line for that, for the left side of the blade. Because that's what we're going to cut now on this dado, is the left side of that dado. Now that I'm happy with the alignment for the first side to cut, I can clamp this down in place. And we're ready to make this cut. So now I need to adjust the height of my blade to however depth I want for that dado. And I'm ready to make this dado. So turn that on. I just leave these right here. I'm pushing against it with this hand, pushing against this, holding down with this one, away from my blade so nothing is over the blade. And then make the first cut. Take my piece out, take my block, and flip it end for end so that I'm still, this is where my rabbit area is for the kerf, and I set it against the block like that. Bring this over, and then make my second cut. And we now have it cleaned it out because of the width and everything. So theoretically, I've got a nice tight fit. And I just made that in just a couple of minutes. I can set this aside, and as long as I'm using this blade, I can use this block as my Kerfmaker now to make dados all day long. And if I want, just for grins, let's take this piece here, which you can see it doesn't fit that dado. So let's make one more dado here just for grins. So I'm going to take this piece, take my Kerfmaker, set it in here so the skinny end is against my stop block. Put this in between here. And we're going to adjust this so that we're going to cut into a new area. And I'll just put it right there. It doesn't matter where I'm going to do this. Have to use a little different stop block here. And that's close enough for where it doesn't matter where I'm putting this really. So now I have this all set up again. I'm using this piece with my Kerfmaker. I have the rabbited end against my stop block, and we can make this cut now. The first cut on the dado. So now we come through here. Take my piece out, flip my block. There's my kerf right there. Bring it against there and make the second cut. And I don't need to clean it out because that's such a narrow cut. And now, oh, that's a tight fit. I missed something. I think I missed that right there. And there it fits into the other one. So I took my 2-minute Kerfmaker and I made 2 dados, 2 different pieces, and accurately got them so that I can now have a curve the right size for my piece. So the critical thing is that when you cut this, you want to make sure that the depth of this to here is exactly right. So when I did this cut here, and I had this pushed over, when you get done, if you do your kerf, if it's too tight, you can sand away the top surface here, and that will bring it down, make this step less, and that'll make your dado, I have to think about this, that'll make your dado tighter as I take more and more away. The deeper this is, the tighter, the deeper this step is, the tighter your dado will be. So if it's too tight, then that means that you need to, well, you're going to have to figure it out. I figured it out when I did it. It's a pain. But once you got it figured out, as you can see how I made it, I go 1/64th. But you can do this. So that's as simple as that. I now made 2 dados. So just for grins, let's take my same dado and let's make, set my height on my blade, and let's make a dado on here to fit a thicker piece of wood. This one is thicker than 1/4 inch. So I have to make it over here rather than have it take so many swipes over there. So when I do it over here, it's the same thing. I have my piece that I set in. I have my Kerfmaker that I made. Set it to the 1/4 inch. The skinny end against my stop block. Bring everything together. Line up to wherever I want to put my dado. Like so. And clamp it down. And then we make our cut. Flip it, move it over, and make the second cut. And just like that, whoops. And it's in place, nice snug fit. So, the other thing I can suggest is that if you want to make your joint a little tighter or looser, you can add a piece of tape to either this surface or this surface one layer at a time, and that'll actually adjust how tight or how loose that joint is using this. So you can fine adjust this if you want to. Like if I wanted to make cuts in something and I'm making finger joints with it instead of dados, which you can do. You can use this to do fingers too, if you think about it. So, and maybe I'll show you how to take a Kerfmaker and do that one of these days if you're interested. But that's basically the whole thing in a nutshell. So, keep in mind, it's very easy to make, as you saw. If you need to watch the video more than once to figure it out, if you get confused about which surface has to be what height here, I went by the rule of thumb. I found that I need a 1/64th of an inch more than the thickness of my blade. That's why when I first cut it, I used something that gave me that extra 1/64th of an inch when I cut this. So this is really deeper by 1/64th of an inch. I know I'm rambling, but it is kind of important that you really understand these things. I always make sure that it's at least wider. This area has to be wider than the thickness of your stop block, so that when you set it in here like this, let me reverse this. So if I was here, and you can do this from either side of the blade, whatever you want, you just want to put your step down area against your block, and you want it to go past that there. If I use something really thick, see, then it hits. That's where it is now, is against it. Would that work? Probably. But I gave myself some leeway here so that my stop block will fit firmly against the step down area. So keep that in mind when you do this. And that's the only thing I can think of that you have to watch out for. If you make this and you get trouble and you can't seem to make it, you want to talk about it, leave me a comment and I'll see if I can help you figure it out. So it's pretty simple, pretty basic, and it's not hard to do. And if you're only making a single version, a single blade version, which is really probably what you should do, most people don't have the setup like I do, then you only need one of these, and you only have to cut it on one side. So if you have any questions, any comments, any thoughts, if you think you know how to make this even better, leave it down below. Now I do want to tell you, before you go, this idea became a reality from a friend of mine named George Fouriezos, I think is how you pronounce it. Anyway, maybe one of these days he'll pronounce it on his channel, so I'll know for sure. But George is a good friend of mine. We've done a couple of things together in the past. And he came out with one of these, only instead of the step down on the wood, he just took a block of wood, put a screw in it, and that became his fat end. And this area became his skinny end of his block. And it worked perfectly. And I took a look at that, and my first thought was, I need to multitask. So whoever thought you could make a Kerfmaker into a multitasker? But apparently, wherever I put it, that's what I did with mine. It's now a multitasker. So, but you can make these things real easy. And it's so simple compared to the way all those other ones. That's why I'd never made one. And if it wasn't for George, he went back and forth with me, and we figured out a better way of doing this between the two of us. And I've been working on this thing for a couple of days now, playing with it off and on, getting comfortable, learning to get all these little nuances in my head straight, because it'll mess with your head. I'll tell you that right now when trying to make one of these. So if you have any doubts, just do it and see how it works. If it doesn't, do it again. So keep plenty of these around. Keep plenty of scrap wood to make dados for test cuts until you finally get it to where you're comfortable with it. Because like I said, this took me, I probably went through 2 or 3 of these things, making these things, to make them work properly and figure out how to make it easily. So I think we've got it down to a science now. That 64th of an inch extra, you may need to make that a 32nd of an inch, or maybe a 128th of an inch, or maybe you don't need to put any spacer in there. I don't know what the difference is, why the extra, but I found that by adding that, it worked perfectly, making it instantly. So I can make one of these on the fly if I have a weird blade in there and I'm going to use it to do some kind of dado or rabbit. You can make one of these from any block of wood, as you can see, in under a couple minutes. So there's no reason not to make a Kerfmaker now. I've never made one now because they're so complicated to make. It was a pain to make one. To me, it was always easier just to fudge my way through until I get it sized. With a Kerfmaker, it is definitely much easier to hit it 100% of the time, the thickness that you want. So this would be a big help when you cut those grooves on a box. When I talk about my easiest box and I had to make those 2 grooves, I now can make those 2 grooves with this and have it dead on accurate when I do that. Now, speaking of the easiest box, just so you know, I didn't forget it, but I'm going to be using this when I do the demo of making those boxes. So what I'm going to do now is my next video should be about making the easiest box, and I promised I would do everything all in one stroke on a video. Before I do that, I'm going to do one video real quick right here at my table saw, and I'm going to make the 4 sides, make the 3 cuts that you have to make them work. Is that 4, cutting them to length. So you cut them to length, then you cut the miter on them, then I cut the grooves in them. Is the way you can do it. And I'll show you how to make all 6 pieces right here on your table saw with nothing more than my miter gauge, my Kerfmaker, a block of wood, and I have another block that I'm going to be using that I'll call my magic block, so that I can make the cuts from one side to the other, and I don't have to move my stop block. Once I set up, I'll be able to do everything without ever having to move my stop block, which makes it even easier to make all 4 sides and make those cuts without having to move that stop block to do it. So if you really want to know how to do all that, stay tuned. That one I will do in my next video, unless George comes up with another excellent idea and I have to get distracted again. So It's George's fault. I had to stop and not do that video. I had to do this once I saw this. I had to get it done. George, thank you very much. You've been a big help. And I think we really helped the woodworking community with this very simple Kerfmaker like nobody else has done. So if you want, make your own OTB Kerfmaker, or maybe we should call it the George Kerfmaker. I don't know, whatever you think. Leave your comment below. Tell me what you think, and we'll call it whatever you guys want to call it. So thanks for stopping by. If you learned something here, you like this video, hit that like button. Lets me know that I'm doing the right thing. Most importantly, though, I found it. Most importantly, though, please come back again, because I'm nowhere near done. Especially with George looking over my shoulder. Thanks. We'll see you guys again soon.